Hello everyone. So here today we'll be discussing about the user interface, an introduction and overview. So here we'll be discussing about the module 1, and before going for module 1, these are the course objectives which is mentioned and the course outcome. And today's topic we'll be discussing about the topics which is mentioned here. Fine. So, before knowing what is user interface design, we have to know how important user interface is. Basically, when it comes to user interface, it is the interface between the user as well as the computer, that is the system. So, the user and the software, how they interact between, how the interface is there in between, that we will learn in this subject. Okay. Now, when it comes to defining the user interface, it is all about designing clear, easy to understand and use interfaces and screens for graphical and web systems. User interface design is a subset of a field of study called human computer interaction. User interface is a part of computer and its software that people can see, hear, touch, talk, and also understand. User interface has essential components, that is input and output. So, after knowing the definition of user interface, it is also important to understand how the good design will matter for a good interface. Now, we know that whenever we have certain good interface or well defined interface, it will play a major role on impacting on users point of view. So it is that how a system is providing a good capabilities of the interface in completing the certain task and how it is performing. So this will be discussed here. Suppose if the design is not good or if it has a poor design, then it may have people chase away from the system permanently, or it can lead to certain frustration or aggregation. It might increase in stress, or it might irritate people more. So it is always important to have a good design. Next, when we have a good design, so what are the benefits of this? We have discussed what are the disadvantages if we don't have a good design. Suppose if we have a good design, what are the benefits of it? See, when we have a better design or when we have a well design, the screen always appears in a very good way. So it will help people to work more on it, and it keeps connecting to the people so that they tend to use more. So this will be one of the major benefits of a design. Now, so before moving on to other topic, we'll be discussing about the human computer interface. We should always remember that when it comes to human interface, human computer interface or interaction, it is always a subset of user interface design. So this thing we should never forget. Okay. Fine. Now, when it comes to a brief history of human computer interface, the lowest and the common level of communication modes that we share are movement and gesture. Next and higher level of communication is spoken language. Third and higher level of communication is written languages. In modern times, we have the typewriter. Nowadays, we are using something called as human computer interaction. Now, few advantages and disadvantages have been mentioned here. Suppose it has the command line, powerful, flexible appeals, or the screen pace. This will be the advantages. When it comes to disadvantage, it will have intolerance of typing errors, difficult for casual users. So, some of the advantages and disadvantages are mentioned here. Okay. So, when it comes to the continuation part of a human computer interface, computers' ability to deal with human communication was inversely related to what was easy for people to do. Computer demanded rigid typed input through a keyboard. People responded slowly to using this device with varying degrees of skills. The human computer dialogue reflected the computer preferences, consisting of one style or a combination of style, using keyboards commonly referred as common language, question and answer, menu selection, functional key selection, and form filling. Systems that recognize human speech and handwriting now exist, although they still lack in universality and richness of typed input. So, yeah, even I do agree with more of this point. The way we type was it is always have a good form, because it is always a great form where you can type more and you can see what you're typing, and when if you have any certain errors you can also have the recorrection of that. Fine. So, after seeing the brief introduction of what is user interface design, let us understand in deep what actually it is. Now, when it comes to the graphical user interface, so user interface design is one part where a graphical user interface will play a major role. So, let us try to understand what it is. So, in brief, a graphical user interface can be defined as follow. A user interface, as recently described, it is a collection of techniques and mechanism to interact with something. So, in a graphical interface, the primary interaction mechanism is pointing device of some kind. What the user interacts with is a collection of elements referred to as objects. They can be heard, touched, or otherwise preserved. Objects are always visible to the user and are used to perform certain tasks. They are interacted with as entities independent of all other objects, including accessing, modifying the objects, or pointing or selecting or manipulating, so they can perform any kind of operations. Now, the introduction to graphical user interface. So before then we had these kinds of graphical user interface, that is Xerox system, Altus and Star. There are two types of Xerox systems, so this is one of a kind of graphical user interface. Okay. So when it comes to the introduction of graphical user interface, we should also remember that the 1985 Microsoft released Windows 1.0, and it was introduced for Amiga 100. In 1987, Apple introduced Mac 2. The first color of Mac 2 and X Windows system became widely available. And then we have the IBM contribution for their system application architecture, including common use access and presentation manager, intent as a graphical operating system replacement for DOS. So here are certain histories of how the evolution evolved from 1973 to 2001. So just have a look on this. Okay. So I was also discussing about the brief history of the computer interaction. Now we will have a brief history of screen design. So as you can see, the first figure here, the figure 1.1a 1970 screen. So this was how the screen was initially represented, and it was effectively kind used in practicing of this kind of monochromatic presentation, where it has text on black and presenting green text on the background of certain things. So another image we have, that is 1980s. This is how the screen was formed, where they started grouping the name, telephone, that is re-enter the datas, and they started segregating the datas from here to here. So you can just see there is a major difference between these two diagrams, where there is no proper segregation. They are just collecting the data here, but here there is some segregation that has been done. They are grouping things and then they are trying to modify or trying to edit or trying to collect the data. Next, here you can see the 1990s and beyond screen. They started grouping and it is very in a proper way, and it is, I feel that they started using the combination of drop down boxes and list of boxes or spin boxes and so forth of all the other boxes, where it is, where it looks very pleasant and it is in a proper way of format. So next, we'll be continuing the characteristics of graphical and web user interface in our next video.